What's up and welcome back to another Fix It with Jerry video. Today we're looking at a water ridge toilet that it's not filling properly, and I see this a lot with these toilets. A lot of the new builds, the flip houses, they're putting these one-piece water ridge toilets in with the same type of fill and flush system. They all give trouble, and this is probably the fourth one that I've repaired. So I'm going to walk through the process of troubleshooting this issue and how to fix it if you have the same style toilet. So check it out. So if you don't know anything about how toilets work, you should probably do a little bit of research before this video, because I'm not going to dive into that. But I'm lifting up on what is the valve and float system for this particular toilet. The bottom half of that little gray section is the float, and the top half is the valve. So when the water reaches the float, it tells the valve to stop allowing water to flow into the tank. And I've got two flush paddles here that are different water levels for, you know, high efficiency toilets, but the culprit is the valve, because right now I'm messing with it. I'm trying to articulate this valve manually and get water to flow into the toilet, which is the first step of troubleshooting, and it's not working at all. No water is flowing into the tank. So I'm going to go ahead and shut the water off and take apart this valve, the top half of this valve, and probably the lower half as well. So these valves are pretty easy to disassemble. A quarter turn will usually break the valve section, the top half loosen. And again, you have to have the water shut off for this, because if you don't, you're going to get full pressure coming right out of that little hole right there. But this underside is a diaphragm. It's part of the valve system, and it appears to be clear. I'm going to crack the valve open just a little bit to make sure water flows through, and you can see some dirty kind of water contaminants come through there. But it seems that the pressure's okay. But I'm still going to do some more investigating, because there is there's a filter in this valve that gives trouble. So I'm going to look at that. To do that, I'm going to have to suck the rest of the water out of the tank, and I'm just going to use a sponge to do that. It takes a lot of time, but you just gently sponge all the water out of the freshwater side of the tank and dump it into the bowl. And you can use a drip pail underneath the toilet, because when you disconnect this stem on the left hand side here, that water is going to dump out onto the floor. So now that I got the water out of the tank, I'm going to disconnect that line. And on these one-piece toilets, that lines are really hard to get to, but it is accessible. You just have to kind of monkey your fingers back in there and loosen that nut that holds the stem on. Sometimes you can turn the top half and hold the bottom half, or hold the top half and turn the bottom half. It's real tight and difficult to get into, but if you just fight with it, you should be able to break that nut loose and get the entire stem assembly off. This is what it looks like fully disassembled. There's this little plastic nut on the bottom half, and if you really have to resort to like a spanner wrench, this is the proper tool to get up in there. This also works really great for faucets as well. But if you don't have one of these, it's still possible to do it, but that just makes it a lot easier. So the stem assembly has a filter in it, and I'm just going to use some needle nose pliers to pull this filter out. And you can see here it's severely clogged. There's just like a whole bunch of gunk that comes out of there. There's rust and sediment and all kinds of other nastiness that are caught up in the screen, and that is what's restricting the flow. So almost no water is able to pass through that filter and fill up the tank. Now I can clean this out and put it back in, but the same problem is just going to reoccur, and I really don't know why this screen is even part of the assembly, because any sediment that's going to get caught in that screen is small enough to pass through the fill valve and the diaphragm I showed earlier. And if it does clog the top half of that fill valve, it's a lot easier to just pull the top of the tank off, pop that valve apart and clean it, than it is to have to go through this whole process to clean the screen. So after I cleaned the whole thing out and kind of assessed the system, I actually wound up reassembling it without the screen in it completely. And I think that's the solution. It's just leave it out. It's not necessary. Reassembly of this stem is just as difficult as getting it apart. It's hard to get to that nut. You can use a spanner wrench if you had one, but the most important thing is the orientation here, because you do have to align the top half of this fill valve with those 4 little notches you can see, and I'll show those in just a second. But what I'm doing here is I'm tightening the underside as tight as I can get it, and I'm going to turn the top side to make it even tighter. And maybe it's not the right way, but it's the way I do it. So these are the little tabs I'm talking about. Those correspond with the tabs you can see on the stem. So we'll put those tabs in the blank space and kind of turn it to lock in. It's usually about a 1/4 turn, and it'll just kind of snap into place. And you just gotta make sure it's not bound up and it's free to move. Then I can reconnect this toilet bowl flush hose here and then test the system. Actually, I still need to reconnect the main supply hose, so I'll put this supply line back on, tighten that up, and then I will test the system again. So here we go. You can see this is working a lot better than it was before. I'm lifting the valve, simulating the float actually rising with the water level and shutting off the water. That's how it's supposed to work. And it immediately shuts off. It's got good water pressure, good flow, the tank's filling up, and it seems that the problem has been solved. And this is what I've encountered time and time again with this style of toilet, is it's just that screen has clogged the sediment and it's not allowing water to flow into the toilet. So I'll go ahead and flush this thing a couple times and make sure that it's going to repeat these same conditions and continue to fill, and nothing else is getting hung up. There's no other issues with the fill and float system, and I think we've got this problem solved. We're good to go. Alright, yeah, that wraps this one up. Look around for all the social media buttons to follow, like, subscribe for more DIY home tips, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching.